as you have seen, I engage in certain things. So, but most of the time I will be rather laid back.
Well, you wrote a wonderful article. Thank you for that. And it's great to have you. So we all have fried brains, but Justice is probably about to fry them a little bit more. So if you haven't met Justice and seen some of the stuff he's presented, you're in for a treat today.
Yeah, exactly. I watched recording from last time a bit.
Good, good.
So it's intriguing. We have a lot of work ahead to
Sure
to
do.
make a fabulous culture. So yes.
Well, we're glad you're on the ride. So I'll hit a few housekeeping items at the top, but Justice, I want to give you as much time as you need. So I'm not going to bring up the screen share right now, but I have in the notes out there. Third week in a row, we've highlighted ourselves in the community call, and we should be really proud about that. The work that we're doing, the progress that we're making, and Justice being here today is going to be a part of that. So next week, next Friday is actually my birthday, so I'm taking time off. I will not be with you, and I'm taking about a week off, so I won't be around the DAO. So I'll be looking for some pinch hitters to take on the community calls, the slide, and I think Sprinkle's offered to run the weekly, so I'll watch them on YouTube. But I'm gonna give my brain a little rest. It's been grinding to the end of this year. Let's see. Anything else? We're working to get the Amira account set up, and a PM Guild ENS. So we'll start publishing some materials out there. I'm gonna put together kind of a to-do list almost in our backlog off of some of the Samantha calls. I'd love for us to do some reset on purpose, mission, values. I think we got a lot of new members and just revisiting some of that. And Renee had done a plan on a page too a while back, a strategic plan on a page. Probably something we want to revisit in the new year. And we're probably due for a retro ourselves. And maybe that's something that I can work with someone on, or Links can work with someone on to help guide you through it and build that skill set. Maybe we kick off the new year and pick a day for a retro. So those are a few things that were top of mind for me. Justice, I really want to turn it over to you so you have as much time as you need. And I may need to bounce about 5 to 10 minutes early. So I selfishly, I want to see as much of it as I can.
Okay, all good. And I don't have a real nice polished presentation for this, but I do have something. And so please, this is a big invitation for everyone on these several things we're going to talk about. Feel free to speak up. There's a lot, not a lot. Everything is unsettled, but there's crazy opportunity here in my business, in my opinion. Okay, and so cool. I will share what I have and let's talk about it. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, you guys should see a browser window, 2 tabs, correct?
Got it.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give a little backstory here to kind of frame up why I think this is important and exciting. Okay. When you really, there's so many tools on the, well, I'll just say real quick, I'll introduce myself. My name's Justice. I go by 0xJustice in the DAO space, and really cut my teeth in BDAO, started in an ops guild, became a governance one of the first GSEs, and then was here in the early days of the founding of PM Guild, and so and then now working with Polygon and their decentralized org development team, and I love BDAO and I love Web3 and DAOs, and most of the time I just feel enough pain in one spot that finally it leads to some moment of clarity of like, wow, we're thinking about this wrong, or dang, if we had a tool to address this more specifically, this would be a game changer. Okay, and so, all right, back to this. So you can think in a way of like certain fundamental incentive patterns, and we'll go through like the history of DAOs, and I'm using the word DAOs loosely, and you'll see why. Okay, so the first version, pre-governance, is Bitcoin. I'm calling these DAOs because DAOs, first and foremost, are kind of a platform, a machine. It's a incentive machine that, the original idea of the DAO was inspired. Actually a sci-fi series called the Damon series by Soares inspired Vitalik to be thinking about this. And one of his first examples was replacing Uber with a platform. And what's interesting is in that example, there's no governance listed. It's basically just a reputation system, people, and an infrastructure in the middle. And so based on the reputation, someone can say, hey, I'll pay you this. There's a smart contract that locks up the money in escrow. And if they go and they deliver the person, then they get paid, right? And so in a funny way, Bitcoin is the first example of this, right? And I'll go through a few properties of this. There's no pre-mine, no airdrop. The protocol pays miners for the first to solve a block, okay? So like I said, pre-governance, no governance. Issues with this is the game mechanics change with every halving. So the thing that drives Bitcoin right now can't drive it later, because later there will be no block reward. So there's a high risk there, because right now people spend millions and millions of dollars to run huge computers to get the block reward because they're going to get a payout in Bitcoin. Well, what if that payout in Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin and Bitcoin's not worth what it costs in electricity? Then you have to make it up in fees, and people are afraid and nervous that's not going to happen. So you have a changing economics. Well, next step, Ethereum. Ethereum, there is a pre-mine, there was a token sell. Similar in this way, it pays miners to solve blocks. But the innovation here, the big innovation, is that with all gas that's spent, there, some of it is burned. EIP 1559, right? And so what you have is you have a stability. You have an issuance happening at the protocol level. It's paying, paying miners, but then also there's a burn. And so the sink, water's coming into the sink, but a relative equal amount is going down the drain, and so you can create a stable economy, okay? Now, where's the problem with that? That sounds like, okay, that's perfect. Here's the problem. There's no governance. Now, some people look at that and say, oh, that's a feature. Well, actually, it's not, because the network actually has to improve, and people have to work on the code. And there's actually no on-chain governance around those changes. It's a soft kind of consensus, a soft governance where, thought leaders say, hey, we should do this thing. All the different miners and clients, they say, yeah, let's do it. And if there's enough agreement, then it happens. So there's a soft governance that's not on chain. Well, now we enter into the first DAOs. Really, the first DAO was the one that got hacked. We won't talk about that one. But the one right after, Moloch DAO, written by Solomon Armin, I believe that's the name. It was a real interesting paradigm. It's amazing. How do Moloch DAOs work? Well, there was no pre-mine. You have to pay money to get shares. Okay, so if you want to join a Moloch DAO, you say, hey, I want to be a member. I want 5 shares, and I'm willing to give you 5 ETH. And then there's governance around whether I get accepted, right? And shares grant governance over a central treasury, which has something in it, because people had to put something in it to get those shares and have the governance. And so there's a feature here, right? Because I'm invested in the decisions, because I actually had to pay to get in. And there's also a mechanism, a rage quit mechanism, where if at any point I want out, I can burn my shares and I get a pro rata share of what's in the treasury. Now, the issues with Moloch is there's a high cost of entry. A lot of these, there's not a direct way to work your way in. You either put up the money and become a member or not, right? And also, at least until recently, they were non-transferable. So there was no liquid market, no liquidity pools on Moloch DAO shares. And this is one reason why we haven't heard about Moloch too much over the last 2 years, year and a half, because it didn't have as popular appeal as the next iteration, which takes us to, I'm calling this generation the snapshot generation. The snapshot generation of DAOs and tokenized communities, you know well, it's the whole ecosystem. This is what we know of when we think of token launches, airdrop, multi-sig, grants committees, right? The whole idea here is that DAOs they launch a token, they airdrop it to everyone, they airdrop a large amount into their own treasury, and then they pay out in grants for people who have ideas on stuff that they could build to improve the DAO, improve the ecosystem. Okay. Now, what are the issues with this? Well, first off, and everyone knows this, is the voter apathy. I mean, look at this. You ever heard this? Let's pay people to vote. There's some voter apathy, and we're getting desperate. We're like, we'll pay you money to make a decision, right? Even if it's not a good one, but just say something, right? So why is there voter apathy? Well, one reason is if I don't have any money in something, am I really engaged to be making decisions and all this, right? If I had to put in 5 ETH, then yeah, I got strong opinions on what we spend money on, right? Insolvency. If the entire thing in the treasury and what was airdropped, if it's not backed to any less volatile asset, I'll just say less. Doesn't need to be the dollar, but something less. Then the wind blows and the whole thing can just go down like a house of cards, right? So it's all internet magic money. So all of this has resulted in people being like, yo, help wanted. Where's the business model here besides magic internet tokens? Where are engaged voters? We need reputation systems. This is not working. And then we need some higher signal when it comes to grants. Because let me tell you, dig in and see what money is spent on even huge projects like Nouns DAO and stuff, or, it's like they're like, hey, let's open a coffee shop. We're like, okay, here's $1 million. Hey, let's make this cutesy video for the Nouns DAO. Okay, here's 150K. And it's hard to say and then the DAO takes all the risk up front. They it sounds like a good idea. I mean, there's no reputation. We kind of know. We made a good case. Let's give them the money, right? So all that to say, I want to introduce in the conversation a new kind of, I call it a incentive pattern. Now, there's nothing like super innovative from a governance and contract level, but it's a different way to apply. Similar that these were different applications of tooling, it's a different way to apply it, right? And some of the properties of this are, it's more like a platform. Like BTC and ETH is a platform. You got one job, solve the blocks. If you solve it, you get paid. We can get time for your nonsense talking all that kind of stuff, right? There is governance, but it's tightly constrained. The governance, see, that's the thing. A lot of people talk about governance like it's so awesome. Governance is a liability, okay? Because it doesn't scale. If everyone needs to decide on everything, and that's where we're like, oh, well, those pods and all this. It's like, like something like a maker DAO where the governance is all on the interest rate and whether to turn on fees. It makes for massive scale. Everyone can just interact with it, and then the governance is just tightly constrained to that one thing. Other properties, you have to pay to play. There's the business solvency. This business model is not just like money, print it, drop it, we'll figure it out. Promise there's utility coming. It's like, no. There's money coming in up front. Next, playing the game is actually doing. It's not like in order to kind of continue in this game, you have to deliver something of value up front. Next up, players run the game, and there's an incentive to continue playing. Now, here we get into it. I've been speaking in real abstract terms. Now let's get into the meat of it, okay? Here's an application of this dynamic, right? And the basic pattern is something like this. There are two actors that can play this game, all right? We'll call it operator school. That's the term I've been using, okay? But it's an educational platform, an educational primitive, okay? So there are two actors. One is teachers, and the other is students, all right? Teachers can come on and say, hey, I'm going to teach a class on XYZ. I'm going to teach a class on governance 101, history of governance. And I have an easy way of scheduling that class. And anyone who wants to attend the class, it's 1,000 bank to attend the class. And if I'm a cool teacher and I have good stuff to say, then the students are like, yeah, man, 1,000 bank, let's do that. Let's rock and roll. Now, they come in, they spend the 1,000 bank in order to attend the class. And we'll get into why someone would want to do this. A percentage of that spend goes into the treasury, and the rest goes to the teacher. Right off, you have incentive, and you also have solvency. There's profitability, right? Now, in exchange for that, the student receives not only the education, but tokens, as it were, shares, okay? In the Moloch language, you could call them loot shares for taking the class, all right? And teachers receive tokens, shares, full shares for teaching the class, all right? Now, students can apply to be teachers after completing N number of classes. So you could say, hey, after 5 classes, 6 classes, 10 classes, 13 classes, whatever, I can apply to be the teacher. Now, why would I want to apply to be the teacher? Well, one, I've built up some reputation that I've been learning some stuff. And also by teaching, now I have a platform on which I can charge money and build up my reputation as a teacher, all right? And the idea here is that students and teachers have a percentile ranking of like where they're at. And so, it's not so important whether I've taken 3 classes. If there's only 3 classes to take, that's relevant. If there's 300, then I'm not so high on the percentile. This is an easy way to visually represent this, okay? There's another example on here. I won't go into it, but it's the exact same pattern as far as events, okay? Now, all of this is relevant for this reason. In the early days of PM Guild, that's how fast Web3 moves. It's already, we can talk about the early days, right? There's been a struggle, at least from my perspective, on, hey, how do we attract like people who know a lot of stuff to come in and teach people? And then how do we incentivize people to learn? And so this idea of creating this kind of operator school came up. Now, the cool part about that is that there is a platform called Rep3, which does kind of badge issuing, claim flow. And I came to Space Monkey from Operator School and told him this idea. And I said, you could build this with minor modifications on your existing platform. And they said, we see the vision, we like it, we're open, we will build this for you. Okay. Now, this is where it gets a little, there's a dynamic here. One aspect you would want in this operator school is you would want an evaluative piece. You just don't want like someone show up to a class, they listen and they claim something. I mean, you can have that, that's fine. But really to drive that learning, you want the person to not only attend, but also to take some kind of some quiz associated with that material in order to validate that. And so all the stars begin to align, and Rep3's like, it would help our scope if we don't have that evaluative piece as a part of our custom build. And then, would you know it, I happen to know somebody. We all know somebody. The wonderful, the fantastic Bankless Academy, Tetranome and FAM, right? They have an evaluative platform where you put up material, and if people pass it, they can get an soulbound token, SBT. And so what's happening right now is I'm talking to Rep3 and Bankless Academy about coming in on a partnership and doing this. And you know what? This is not on here, and I felt it when I was writing this. Like, what am I missing here? This is the big one. The freaking pilot first users. This is it. First application. Okay. So the idea here is that Rep3 would build it. Bankless Academy would be the brand and would provide the evaluative piece. And so when someone takes the class, the teacher instructs them, hey, make sure you take the governance quiz or whatever. And then when they go to claim their badge for, that they've, passed the tests, then the person who taught that could see like, oh, they claimed their badge from Academy, they were there, they participated, and then they could grant it to them, right? And then the cherry on this as well is that Polygon has said, if you guys pull this off and it looks nice, then Q2 we would look into like supporting this initiative. Okay, so all of this is kind of the plumbing and the like the productization underneath us. And I would say this, I feel strongly about this because every single tokenized community, every DAO right now is struggling with the education piece, because education is not like an extra, some DAOs need it, some don't. It's actually fundamentally necessary to a microeconomy because it's the supply side of the business demand. You know, you have projects, you have ventures, you have productive endeavors. There has to be an educational element that feeds that. So not only every DAO, every guild needs this, because even according to the BDAO Constitution, onboarding and education is the prime directive of every guild, right? And so there's a little background, you know, the mechanics of how such a thing would work, the players, and then we can get in. Next, I wanted to talk about like, okay, but practically what would this look like for PM Guild? But let me pause there and see if there's any questions or comments. All right, cool. I'm not for pausing too long. Makes me nervous. I'll keep going. Okay, next up. What does this mean for PM Guild? Now, here's first thing is here's on the framing, okay? Now, I'm concerned if PM Guild really just focuses and says, okay, project management, I'm concerned that project management as like a science in a field is kind of a solved problem with a ton of content and expertise. And we would almost, like PM Guild would almost be like not pressing far enough in to the ethos and like the radicalness of DAOs and Web3 and stuff like that if they just stop there. And I also think there's like a next level. I need the exploding mind gif on here of just like entering into another dimension, right? Where the fundamental nature of DAOs is coordination, right? And incentives. And that is what PM is pursuing. It is coordination. And so to talk about like different levels of coordination, like different abstract levels, and of course like project management is a part of that, but you know, for myself and maybe for others too, coming into a curriculum that's talking about like coordination and incentive design, and then kind of rebranding a lot of the stuff we know from project management and agile and lean and all this in those terms will draw people in a lot stronger, and we can leverage all the kind of the amazing cool innovations happening in the Web3 and all this. There's a major upside in reframing PM as coordination. Now there's one way to do this is there's a paper, we'll look at this in the next tab, called, this is a first draft like operator school idea. And one way to do this would be to say, okay, we're going to do like the full-blown project management, agile, lean, operator school program in PM Guild. Okay, this PM Guild would own this mofo. Okay, and what we could do is we could launch on Mirror this operator school and limit it. This is an idea. Limit it to 150 NFTs. Each of those NFTs would be like $100, right? Now, the reason why I say that is because 150 is Dunbar's number of like, you go beyond that and it's untenable as far as natural reactions. 2 is $100 is a sweet spot for what people will pay. And you can say, hey, do you believe in this vision? Would you want this for your own community? If so, mint this, 150. That gets us a nice little treasury of something to work with that, you know, we have something to sweeten the deal, incentivize like what's happening with Rep3 and Academy and even our own people. And the idea though is that people who have this NFT, they would get like weekly updates of like how the product's coming along. how's it being built? We need this feature. Like we're the first users of it, the first people to be able to be instructors and all this. You'd have a weekly cadence of developments, right? And then the next step too would be like, we could proto start this teaching thing even before the product's ready. That would just be a part of it. Like I think Lynx has said this before. He's like, this whole scheme, we could do this in a spreadsheet. And it's like, yeah, rock on. We could still do the payments and like, you do the on-chain payment and then you get the token gate, you go in, there's all kind of like huddle one-on-one. There's all this cool stuff we could use even before this like flow is done with the product, right? Which would be pretty exciting. And so there's that idea. It's out there. Now, I want to say my own motivation in this really is like, is really just a love for the ecosystem. Anything that Rep3 has said, hey, if you successfully do this, we'd be willing to do some kind of rev split if this is replicated across other communities. And I'm just here saying before you, full transparency, whatever any personal gain I could get by pushing this forward, I would redirect towards the success of this mission, towards the community, the multi-sig, whatever. I'm here because I want better primitives for DAOs to succeed and for people to like learn and teach. And frankly, there's a ton of stuff I'd love to teach on, and I don't have a mechanism to do that builds up reputation in kind of a sandbox environment and in a cool way, right? And so this is the operator school kind of like initial draft. My wife says that this looks like some kind of cult religion picture. I don't care. You guys feel free to say otherwise. But to me, it's like you have this like hyperstructure up here, and then you have this is the operator, the DAO operator, basically like knowing all the coordination mechanisms and making them available, to people in order to like interact and coordinate amongst themselves, right? And this is one thing too, that's a big offering of Rep3 is these dynamic badges. And so the part of the flow would be, you come in, I'm a part of operator school, I admit my badge, and then that badge changes every new class you take. So you take a class like on summoning, DAO summoning 101, and like your master badge like dynamically updates. You get that. Now we're talking free decks. Yeah, that's the stuff I love that whole vibe. And so the original idea was to like frame the PM Guild stuff in these type of terms, where you'd almost have like 3 levels of proficiency, right? Now here's the thing too. This was the original framing. GCal has done a lot of work in thinking about looking at framing this a bit differently, and I want to give him time to talk about his frame. But if we can nail the ethos and the practicalities of what the skill tree looks like, we'll have magic on our hands. But the original idea is like, the first level or stuff that falls in the category of DAO contributor is almost, it equates to like the Scrum team member, right? You know the basic constraints, you understand the rules of the game, and this could relate to basic DAO tooling, coordination patterns, all the basic lean stuff and all. And then next would be like the DAO coordinator. This equates to like the Scrum Master type stuff, where you don't just know how to coordinate manage yourself, but like teams of people. And then the architect, this gets into the more of the coach and designing the game. What are the incentives? What's the larger like tokenomics, token engineering, and this stuff? And then the summoner presses into like agent of change. This is like, what's the lore that drives? We have a shared enemy in BDAO. The shared enemy is the banks and in the financial institutions. On the Moloch side, it's a little more on the coordination failure and the lack of regen culture and stuff. But the summoner is like, what's the shared enemy, and all that, it goes into there. And so that's my rapid blast of 30 minutes. I hope it didn't take up too much time, and it charges your imagination and gets you excited. And if there's any questions or comments, feel free to jump in. If not, then we'll hand the mic back over to GCal.
Well, my mind's blown as always. I'll pause for a minute to see if there's any questions, and what I'll do is I'll share the competency matrix as it stands today, and then we can maybe think about what it might look like as it merges with this. But I'll pause for a minute. There's just a bunch of brains leaking out of ears onto the floor right now on this Friday afternoon, right?
Justice, can I read below on the screen?
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying
And I can share this out.
All right, cool. Thank you. It's funny. I was working on this last night, and I changed the definition. I had like for the basics, like as a PM, and I added like an enabler of community coordination that is responsible for organizing, planning, directing, and growing as a successful community. It's funny that you mentioned about the organizing today. It's such a huge part of it.
Yeah, the coordination piece, here I'll say something, and I'm going to say it in hushed tones, because please no one record this and put it on Twitter and call me a heretic, right? The coordination is like way bigger than even the community piece, because with such a strong emphasis on community, and I'm not against it, it can actually set us up for failure, because is a team of 7 people, is that a community? In my experience, I don't typically call them a community, but if I somehow think I'm not being successful by facilitating like the most awesome coordination in a smaller group like that, then I kind of set myself a mental model that makes me feel like I'm like not doing things right, And so coordination first, and also the whole principle of scaling, good scaling. Like if you can't do it right in a small scale, then scaling it only scales dysfunction. It doesn't make it functional as you grow up. And so just throwing that out there.
Hey, it's Freedex, first time caller. I'll be very brief because I'm new to the DAO space. I'm thankful for being referred here to Bankless, but this is really cool. So the thing that I've noticed, I'm a systems thinker in spirit and thought, and that's been my observation, is how do you get people, how do you, like even that GIF, right? How do you get the community to feed in to create that energy to make the decisions and move forward? So yeah, I want to read this. I'm super excited. Love you all, and I just met you.
My guy, thank you for saying that. I'm glad you're here.
Cool, Freedex, thanks for speaking up. We're so happy to have you. We can already sense your energy through the chat, and then now hearing your voice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal the stream, Justice, and I'm going to bring up the Web3 PM competency model. And everyone seeing my screen? Someone just give me a holler. Let me know yes.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, cool. So right now it's really zoomed out, and I'm going to start to zoom in here and start to think about this in the context of what Justice just presented, and especially these levels across the top. So let me zoom in to about 90% now. You almost could replace these levels with, what was it, contributor, coordinator, operator, summoner, architect. Did I nail those?
Yeah, you nailed it, dude.
Good. So you think about it, you almost could replace these levels with those terms. And then down the left-hand side here, and everything that's built here came from the skill tree that Swole had built, the Web3 PM, Web2 PM brainstorm that we did, and then anything else I saw in Sprinkle's education platform. So we can add on to this. This is just to put something out there, kind of a target piece. But when Justice was talking operator school, and I was finally able to get this out of my brain, they seem to come together, because now as you think about the different levels you saw and the Rep3 work around this dynamic, dynamic NFT? Am I saying that right, Justice?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This could start to build as you build a competency and you build a different level in all of those. So we've got technical skills, professional skills, philosophy, strategy, planning, execution. And then we need a definition. And then all of this needs to be defined. What's a high level definition of what it would mean to be a level 1 or a contributor? And then where it starts to come together, and all of this again is just beta draft, I plug some numbers in here, is then you start to take those same competencies and say, well, what level, if this was this is Web3 PM1. So let's say this said contributor, and down all of these different competencies, where do you need to be at to get that contributor credential? Where do you need to be at to continue to move up? So you're acquiring these competencies. That's one credential that you could be getting. You're acquiring different levels in the competencies, and then you're acquiring kind of the title, that what you just saw. And then it goes even a level deeper, because this isn't enough, into the actual skills, because you have competencies and then you have skills. So you're looking at this and saying technical skills, Web3 and DAO tooling and blockchain. Well, now I built that out a little bit. Well, now you have a skills matrix, and you could start to list some of the different tooling in here. And I just listed some that I know about. How skilled do you need to be in Coordinate, Gnosis, Notion, Discord, Dwork, Charmverse, Asana, Trello, Miro? And we could build that out even further. So you can start to see the way this thing blows out and how it could support this operator school mentality. So one if you're interested in teaching something like this, you could put a course together in some of these high level competencies. If you're real technical and you want to get into some of the skills, you could teach that. But you could start to build out like the journey and the learning journey of what it would take to move up those different levels of within the operator school. Or if we want to make this specific to PMs too, like what does it take to be a Web3 PM, and what are the competency levels you need to be at, and then what are the skills that are underneath those competencies. So I know I went through that very quick, but I'm interested to pause and see, one, does the competency model make sense, and then two, does its tie to the operator school potential make sense?
I obviously, I think it makes a ton of sense, and one reason why that is, like for me, is that one of my early first jobs in BDAO was as a project manager for a job, project champion, and it wasn't the greatest success. And I'm coming from like a lot of years in IT project management of like multi-million-dollar, migrations, enterprise migrations. And I'm like, I don't understand why it's not working. It's because you're in a different environment. The incentives are different. Like people can just show up and never show up again, or say they're going to do something and never do. So it had to be a total different, like such different tools and incentives needed to be a part of it. And so we can like connect those two and have something that literally you can't find anywhere else. So I think it's very cool. Apropos, as they say.
And Sprinkles, I believe you had started to fork this. Is that something you're actively working on? I know this is the base version I put out there to take a look at.
Yep. It definitely is something that I'm working on and putting together all the, bits of information that I've been gathering.
Cool.
To it.
Anything anyone wants me to dive into deeper, navigate to, or re-explain? I know we just introduced in this 40 minutes a lot of material, so we're happy to rewind and play any of it back.
Like specifics on this GCal or overall or
Anything on what we just kind of covered in the last 40 minutes.
Yeah, I have a question. The table that you're showing now in the presentation that Justice just showed us, are they available? Because I would need to dig in and look at this for a few hours.
Yeah, so this matrix here, I had a thread going. I might need to bump it again. So I put out like a 2-minute explainer video on this matrix, and then I have it available in view only, but you're welcome to fork it. And what I want to do is we didn't want to go any further until we brought Justice here and understood the operator school and how this might impact the competency matrix. Because we may pivot more towards, right now this was very PM focused, but do we need to pivot this a little bit more towards what we want to launch with operator school, or are we launching a PM, this PM curriculum through operator school? I think those are some questions to answer. But then what we're going to need a lot of help with from the community is filling all this in. What is it, what does it mean? We'll go to incentive engineering here and payroll. What does it mean to be a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, a level 4, a level 5? And then what's the coursework or the teachings and learnings underneath that to understand how to get there, and then test in some way to credential and be there, and then maybe eventually learn how to teach it yourself. So everything here, so all of these definitions down need to be filled out. All of these definitions across need to be filled out. We need to add or change anything that's missing. And then we need to think about what from a leveling perspective, where does, again, if these, right now it says Web3 PM 1 through 5, and that's just, this would be your most mature PM. This may be DAO architect if we were to follow the operator school naming conventions.
I think it's awesome. This is really good.
One thing to keep in mind too is if we're real smart with this, we don't need to say ahead of time exactly everything that needs to be in every category. If we could do this and have no categories, like we could just say, oh, if you take a class, you get credit, and anyone can charge for any class, and then teachers get, but then we wouldn't have any kind of like high signal dynamic NFT. And also, like the first thing that someone asks, if you say, hey, would you come give a talk or whatever, they're like, what on? That's every time that they ask. Hey, would you write something on what do you want me to talk? So if we have broad categories to say, okay, we have 4 categories, and maybe those categories, like maybe each of them is not a competency, but it's just a type of work, and someone can come in and say, okay, this is this type of work. And so they're free to say, like, for instance, myself is like on the contributor and coordinator, I'm not these days not so excited about on the architecture stuff. All I want to jam about. And then the summoner stuff, I'm like, the people know that dark magic elsewhere. I know the people who know that stuff, and it ain't me, right? But they could come in and almost like choose your own adventure style and contribute. And in that way, we could have almost like these different categories that have an unlimited growth in a visual format in the dynamic NFT. And so something really interesting where, one person's NFT looks real different because they've specialized in one area, but then you can see relative to that base where they're at relative to the entire pack. And that's important because if we just say, oh, the total, it doesn't communicate a lot. But if you say, given this particular instance, this person's the top 2% or whatever, there's something neat. And really the game on this is not to build a product in one sense, it's to build like a tool that anyone could fork and create their own educational. As easy as someone can go off and kick off a multi-sig or a new Moloch DAO and DAO house, they could do the same thing, which that's the real crazy unlock. You don't like the school anymore? Kick off your own. Announce it on Twitter. Get your teachers teaching and people learning and have your own system. And it's all just like, click and run,
Yeah, when I talked to Justice earlier this week, getting him on the agenda for today, I was saying, you think about our PM Guild logo, and it's a tree with leaves on it, and those leaves could be dynamic based on how well you're getting educated and credentialed, and then that's when Justice was like, yeah, and that could be relative to everyone who's also educating that. So if you've learned and gotten credentialed more than anyone else, your tree is full. Relative to that, but that it could start to come down as people are skilling themselves up, and we get an understanding of how skilled you are based on that how full your PM Guild leave trees are, and that's just an example thrown out there, but just to give you a visual of what that might look like. Justice, I know I had a question. I am gonna have to bounce a little bit early. I'm just gonna come down off the share unless if anyone is gonna bring it back up. So like Bankless Academy already has some education stuff out there. How does this plug into, we don't need to rebuild what already exists. So like blockchain basics and some of the courses they have, the fundamentals for the contributor, how does this plug into maybe what's already out there?
Now I'll say this as a pre statement from that question, as far as the terms of, okay, what does hold, just give me one sec. My oh man. My 6-year-old son calls me on FaceTime and I was like blowing up all my devices. Okay, sorry. My pre-answer to that question is we're in the very early stages of like, what does it look like between Bankless Academy and Rep 3? So early that I've talked to each of them and they're like, we're open. Let's figure out what that looks like. But this week we're so busy. Like, we'll talk next week. And so I'm optimistic. This is optimistic, right? I'm optimistic in saying like there's something here. We'll figure it out, but exactly with the contours of that. And the thing that is on the table that we can work with is that in the claims process on Rep 3, they can put an arbitrary requirement. Either that the teacher can say, hey, you need to have, just some arbitrary token requirement. You need to have this POAP in order to claim this, right? And the teacher looks and sees it. Or at the product level where you can't even try to make the claim unless you have the prerequisite that was listed on that badge. And the beautiful part is Bankless Academy is issuing these nice SBT badges. And so that would be the tie-in. And so, any material that's on Academy, we could build a lesson and say, oh, you need this, or even credentials or tokens being issued anywhere. So we get like some real kind of creative freedom with that,
That's very cool. I love the composability and kind of orchestration that we can plug and play the material in that way.
Yep. The tie-in that's really interesting is it's the payment side. And if you think about it, in platform design, the payment side is always the thing, right? PayPal has it easy because when you make a transaction, they take a portion. There's no way for you to kind of, people aren't like messaging the person on PayPal and saying, well, I'll pay you over here. They're not using the platform to connect and then connecting in another way. The beauty of an operator school is that the class would be the link and visually it would be there to attend. And then if the payment can be captured there, then the percentage that goes to the teacher could go, and then the percentage that goes to the treasury could go, let's say 10% or whatever, right? And so you would have the reputation and the payment all tied together like that. And that would be the real kind of sweet spot.
GCal, how do you envision this as a first going on Bankless Academy in a way that it will tie in with Operator School?
It's a great question, and I think what we've got to do is probably pick something that what's going to be the first course that we launch as a PM guild, or what's the first competence we really want to work on, and work through some of the mechanics and logistics of building that, and then someone being able to either teach it or is it a talk, or is it just a course, and then how does that then start to supplement and fill in part of what the operator school like rails are going to be. It's the one we talk a lot about retrospectives. Is there someone that's interested in learning more about retrospectives and teaching that? Right now we actually have some requests we can't fulfill, so we've got to build that muscle in the guild. We talk about async PM. Are there courses around that we want to build and then teach? So I think it's really picking one and working through that, and then understanding we'll learn a lot by kind of plowing that field and then starting to pave over it with new courses.
The neat part is with this proposed setup, even the term course is a big word, right? It's really like classes or micro classes, right? So like I have a talk that I like to go back and make just iterative improvements on called data-driven agility. And I've given it in this setting some time back, right? And I thought, I want to improve it and give it again. In this scenario, I could make an academy lesson with a badge put it on Academy, and then say, hey, I'm doing through operator school the talk on data-driven agility, and there could be some real independent, someone else feels real strongly about, like, hey, we need to get back to lean principles. I'm going to do a class on lean. And what that does is Bankless Academy wins because they have people who have an incentive to add courses. Rep 3 wins because they have users for a product and a use case that's more specific than it's just a general badge claim. And we win because everyone who feels strongly about something can come to the group and say, this is a curriculum, how do we feel about it as a first pass? And then they can independently like produce it, you know? Loosely coupled, tightly aligned, you know?
I do have to run, unfortunately, so I'll leave you in good hands. But thank you all. As I said, I won't be here next week, so happy holidays to those that, you know, whatever you're celebrating, and hopefully you're taking some time with yourself, with your families, with your friends, and take a minute to breathe. It's been a heck of a year, but as you can see, we're about to really kick some things off here heading into 2023, and I couldn't be more excited.
Thanks, GCal.
Awesome, GCal. Thank you so much, GCal. We'll see you.
Yeah, thank
Have a
you.
good weekend.
We'll see you soon. You too.
All right. Any questions, comments from anybody else?
No, I'm still trying to, you know, piece this together in my head, Justice. And by hearing this right, that basically our first step be geared towards Bankless Academy, which is just something that a user can go through themselves, computer with, but that we want that piece to be able to broaden out somebody else to come in and teach that in a more in-depth setting.
Yeah, that's what I think. You know, it's like, hey, here's you could start in either direction. You could say, well, I have a talk. Let's figure out what converting that talk into an Academy lesson looks like, because there are constraints with that. There's a bit of a learning curve. You can do it on, you know, Notion, but there's best practices on how many slides you have, like in the Academy setting. So you could go that direction, converting an existing talk into a lesson like that. Or you could say, you know, I already have, like, I think a pretty good lesson. Let me turn that now into a talk, like a slide deck with the question and answer, you know, kind of the interactive with all the extra bells and whistles, something where people are like, yeah, I took the Academy lesson, but dude, I want to hear from the author on the deep dive, the secret sauce, you know, and see, you know, kind of put a deck together and a talk in that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
If the meeting's starting to kind of wrap up, I just want to understand how I can learn more. I'm not like super aggressively trying to butt my way in, but I'm just trying to get on the radar and understand how I can help and stuff.
Absolutely. I would say, let's as a follow-up after this meeting, in the PM General, we'll post the draft of this operator school. Please keep in mind, you know, like we're real early. We just didn't want to bowl into like, this is what it's going to be. Like we want this group to own this whole initiative, right? So bringing this up very early, right? So I can share this kind of preliminary slide deck with this paper, and so people can dig in. You know, we'll meet here again next week, same bat time, same bat channel, and see if we can maintain a cadence on this is ongoing. And we will get a little bit more horsepower on this with a solid buy-in from Rep 3, Academy. Academy is such good executioners. When they got a horse in the fight, they will be on it, and it will be beautiful. You know, I would say from a more problem to be solved standpoint, finding the coherence between the language of the operator school, the operator, the coordinator, and the more traditional kind of project manager, finding the coherence on those two, that's cool and interesting, but still like very relevant to what PM Guild is. And then the second step from that is like, how do we visually represent that in a way that can grow forever and it works in an animation? Those would be the really interesting creative pieces for us to solve. And FreeDex, it's weird, but the way things work around here is you just gun what you're interested in, and we do so in a way that those people who contribute the most have an upside and ownership and all that, and bragging rights and reputation and all. So happy to have you here and your ownership in this thing as well.
And Fredex, if you check out our Notion page, there's a Canva board on there that you can look and see if there's any that you are interested in picking up. So in the education stream, I will be putting up on the next 24 hours or so. Definitely check that out.
All right, thank you. I will.
So tagged you in. We have a channel here. Things that members want to see in the course. So feel free to drop any suggestions there. We're trying to kind of empty them out, or people have volunteered to work on them.
So it's just this is random, and I just had in real life lunch meetup for Web3 here where I am in Iowa, USA, and there was a young woman there that just relocated from Brooklyn, New York to Iowa, where her family's at, and she works for Consensus, which is like a software that sits behind MetaMask. And she works for the Consensus Academy, which is tasked with building an education platform for Web3. And she started her job 6 months ago. Yeah. And then I'm just like, and I'm not trying to like whatever throw a wrench at him. It's like it sounds so familiar, and not familiar, but like related. So I definitely want to introduce her and maybe see if she's interested in this. This is really cool. And I mentioned Bankless DAO, and she's like, "Yeah, everybody's heard of them." I'm like, "Oh well, I'm really new, so I'll put the mic down. Everybody have a great Friday."
Yeah, that's cool.
Everyone knows Consensus too, so.
No, they're nobodies.
Who?
Yeah.
There's not consensus on whether or not Consensus is no.
Yeah. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Any closing comments, questions?
Thank you very much for coming today, Justice, and going over that. Definitely didn't disappoint us, I'm sure. For me, you didn't. I'm sure for everybody else, I can speak for also.
My pleasure. Love the magic that happens in this room. So appreciate you guys, and we'll keep it going. And I'm going to take a break from Discord and his chair for a while. But when I come back, I will post this stuff in the channel. So thanks everybody. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, and thank you to all of the newer people that showed up today. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I will just give everybody a reminder that in the end of the day, especially Fridays, with our brains, we all are humans. So please take care of yourself and take some time off, because as some of you said, 2023 will be a highly interesting and productive year, I think.
I agree with that. All the best, everyone.